worked very hard to come up with some of these wonderful recipients. Dr. Fred Baker, Dr. Bruce Carlin, Dr. Jane Lockery, Dr. Michelle Pagnaire, and Abhijit Rochaudhary. Let's give them a round of applause. So the first award we're going to give out today is now called the Editor's Award. It used to be called the Wisteria Award because apparently back in 1974 when the Worcester District Medical Society's president, Dr. Bachrach, was commenting on the fact that wisteria was growing in front of the library where much of his work as editor of the then Worcester Medicine magazine, which continues today. So he named the award the Wisteria Award, but we changed it to the Editor's Award because we thought it would be too associated with Terry Hatch and some of those 1990s kind of TV stars on Wisteria Lane. It's an inside joke for like a dad joke. Okay, so anyway, the winner of this year's Editor's Award is Dr. Robert Sorrenti, who's sitting right here, messing with our camera. So I have a little bio of Dr. Sorrenti. He graduated from Harvard Medical School in 1973 and completed a residency in pediatrics and was chief medical resident at the Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago. He returned to Massachusetts to be chief of pediatrics at the Worcester City Hospital. For about 12 years, he was in private pediatric practice while participating in student and resident education. Following that, he embarked on a career in healthcare management. For about 15 years before his retirement in 2020, he served as the chief operating officer of a health plan. He currently remains very active in his community, and in addition to his participation in the activities of the Medical Society, serves on the Worcester Public Library Board and the Worcester Music Worcester Board. I think Dr. Sorrenti has been a model. He's a past president of the Worcester District Medical Society, and he continues to tirelessly work for us in any capacity that we care to call upon him for. So without any further ado, Dr. Sorrenti. It's got wisteria on it. Oh, it's great. Good, Ken. Thanks.
So you mentioned any capacity, and I'm running this. I'm also the videographer. It's way out of my comfort zone. So I'm really honored to receive this award, and it's really been my pleasure to be able to work on the production of Worcester Medicine on a regular basis. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the production of Worcester Medicine is really a group effort. And I would begin by talking about the first group, and that is the editorial board, because they are such a great group of people to work with. They're enthusiastic, creative, thoughtful, and committed. And they're the people that come up with the themes for the issues and for the authors that write the articles in the issues. The second group, and I don't know if there's anybody from the editorial board here or has been on the editorial board, but they should raise their hands because they really do a great job. The second group that I would point out is our guest editors, because over the last 2 years we've gone to having a separate guest editor for each issue. And each editor has brought their own sort of perspective and expertise and talent to the issue, and has sort of guided that issue through. So we appreciate the work of the guest editors. But the person that I really have to thank, because this is the person without whom nothing would happen, is Martha. Because she is devoted to Worcester Medicine. It has to be a work of love. I could email her anytime, day or night, and she responds immediately about it. Not that I should be up there late at night doing it, but she is. So thank you, Martha, for guiding each issue into its production and delivery. With that, I really appreciate the award. And if anybody out there wants to be a guest editor or a member of the editorial board, just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And you can't really mention Worcester Medicine Magazine or just about anything that the Worcester District Medical Society has done without mentioning one of its past presidents who's going to come up now, Dr. Jane Lockery. Jane has been an amazing mentor to hundreds of medical students, runs several art of healing courses, runs a clinic at St. Anne's Church. Is just a breath of fresh air, and as former editor of the Worcester Medicine Magazine, followed in the great tradition that Paul Steen had set of running crisp meetings where we got the agendas done, and I never have attended meetings like that in any other capacity. So very grateful for her. She's going to introduce the winner of our Massachusetts Clinician of the Year. And this is an old acquaintance and friend of hers, and she's going to explain to you the significance of the award, which actually was voted on in the fall but gets presented every spring, and then we'll have the recipient come up and get their honor. So here's Dr. Lockery.
Thank you, Dr. Hirsch. I wish my mother was here so she could have heard that introduction. So every speaker who introduces somebody always starts by saying, it's my pleasure, to introduce so-and-so, but the difference between them and me is I really mean it. So it's really my honor to present Dr. June O'Connor to you for the Community Clinician of the Year Award. So this award was adopted by the interim House of Delegates meeting in November of 1998. It was established to recognize a practitioner from each district who has made significant contributions to their patients and to the community. So each district is encouraged to identify one deserving physician, and certainly Dr. O'Connor is very deserving of this. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. O'Connor. She grew up in Brooklyn, New York, graduated from Boston University, then went on to the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, Ireland. I'm so jealous. And she did her OBGYN residency at Stanford Hospital in Connecticut. So June walked in 5 years ago into St. Anne's clinic and said, I'd really like to help at St. Anne's. I think she was horrified by the lack of privacy that we had, and she suggested bringing the patients into her private office, and has been doing this for the past 5 years. She does sees any patients that with any kind of GYN problem. A lot of our patients are from Brazil, where, believe it or not, cervical cancer is the second leading cause of death in women in Brazil. A lot of our patients had positive pap smears, and June offered to do all the cervical biopsies and everything, but our patients couldn't pay for the pathology. So she did so many of these pathologies that we had to apply to the Mass Medical Society for a grant to cover those. So June has been really wonderful in seeing our patients. When we opened up St. Peter's, which is in Maine South, she was more than happy to see our patients from there also. So in addition to all her volunteer efforts at the free medical program, she travels at least once a year to the Dominican Republic to do surgeries there on patients who are underserved. She's also part of the Shrewsbury chapter of the Days for Girls, which is an international organization that increases access to menstrual care and education by developing partnerships with both local and global partners. So in summary, June has so many wonderful qualities that make her an outstanding candidate for the Community Clinician of the Year award. You know, her demeanor just exudes love of medicine and for the care and a passion for caring of the underserved community in the Worcester area. The science of medicine can be learned, and June has done this really well, but the art of medicine comes from within, and this is where June excels. So June, thank you for all your work. Come on up here.
Thank you, Jane, and good evening to everybody. I thank you for all your thoughtfulness. I'm deeply honored by this award. I would like to thank the Massachusetts Medical Society, the Worcester District Medical Society, and my nominators and supporters, Dr. Jane Lockery, Dr. Nandana Kandra, Dr. Joel Popkin, Dr. Annie Abraham, Lisa Izzo, and John Smith-Bisler. Jane just gave you a brief overview on some activities that I'm involved in. I'd just like to give you a few more words on those. The St. Anne's and St. Peter's Free Medical Clinic for the uninsured and underinsured of Worcester County. These patients are very appreciative. I see them in my office. Mostly routine GYN visits, but some heartbreaking cases of infertility, premature ovarian failure, and there are limited resources for these problems. I'm sure most of us in this room have never had the opportunity or experience of having a medical disorder and unable to access medical care. And sometimes this is devastating for these patients. As Jane said, I'm also involved in the Dominican mission, where a bunch of us go down and perform GYN surgeries at Good Samaritan Hospital in La Romana, Dominican Republic. We do the surgeries, GYN surgeries and hysterectomies on underserved women in the La Romana area and women in the Betes. And the Betes are little villages located in the sugarcane fields. These are mostly migrant Haitian workers. The people in those villages live in rudimentary huts. There's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no toilet facilities, and even some of them have no outhouses. Some of these women have large fibroid uterus and very heavy bleeding. And there's limited disposable sanitary products in that area and no waste removal systems. And sometimes the patients even have to get their family members to donate blood for them because they're unable to afford blood transfusions or to pay for a doctor to do their hysterectomy. And I want to just tell you one of my favorite stories from the Dominican is there was this young girl, she was about 20 years old, and bone thin. She had a large ovarian tumor, which was benign, but she was so thin and this tumor was so large, she was unable to button up her jeans, and she was shunned by her community because she looked 5 months pregnant but wasn't married. So this operation took us approximately an hour, and we went to see her the next day, and she was just beaming from ear to ear. She was so happy. She could button up her jeans and be like the other girls, and now is welcomed back into her community. And as Jane said, I also sew for the Days for Girls International Group, and this is an organization that constructs reusable menstrual hygiene kits for girls and that are distributed around the world. And actually they have done some distributions in the Worcester area for the recent refugees. And in some countries in the world, girls can't go to school when they have their period, and they're meant to sit in these menstrual huts while they have their period, so they miss school. So these kits afford them the opportunity to go to school while they have their period, and therefore further their education. So this fits in very well with our Dominican trip, because when we go to the Dominican, we take a suitcase full of these kits, and at the end of the week, after we've been operating all week, we go to one of the Betes or one of the local orphanages, and hand out these kits to the girls. And they're so appreciative just to get something new and something so beautiful, even in the beginning when they don't know what the purpose of the kits are. They just love to get them. So that's a little bit of everything, and I'm very appreciative of this award. All these activities are no burden or hardship on me. I feel deeply fulfilled in seeing how much effort, or a little effort, it takes on my part to dramatically change someone else's life. And this adds value to my life. And I am the lucky person that gets to be face-to-face with the patient, but there are many people behind the scenes that go unnoticed. So in turn, I would like to give my recognition to all the doctors and the staff of the St. Anne's and St. Peter's Medical Clinic for all their hard work and continued commitment to the people of Worcester County, and also everybody who helps us with our Dominican mission. Even how seemingly insignificant they think their role is, it's vital for us to fulfill this mission. And also to all the workers and leaders at the Days for Girls International Group for their long hours sitting at a sewing machine or cutting material, or standing over a hot iron to make sure all these kits are beautiful and special and perfect for each girl. And lastly, I'd like to thank my children, Sarah, who's with us tonight, and Dan, who was unable to be here. Thank you for your love and support throughout the years. You are my strength and inspiration. Thank you again for everybody, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you so much, Dr. O'Connor. The next award is not issued every year, so this has always special significance. This is the President's Leadership Award, and thank you very much, Dr. Spanakis, for allowing us to nominate this awardee. It's kind of with a heavy heart that I'm going to give you this speech, and I'm going to stick to it so I don't get more emotional about it. Dr. Finberg, who is the recipient this year, was a friend and a colleague and a mentor, a chair emeritus in the UMass system, and a distinguished professor of medicine. He was an accomplished clinician, infectious disease researcher, mentor, and valued leader of our Department of Medicine for over 21 years. Dr. Finberg was an internationally renowned physician scientist with over 300 publications and innumerable research awards and honors from the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and other agencies. We all witnessed the significance of Dr. Finberg's research as he helped develop, test, and implement new therapies for our patients affected by SARS-CoV-2. He helped shape our response to the pandemic and was the principal investigator on multiple clinical studies related to the therapeutics and vaccines for SARS-CoV-2. Appointed in 1999 as the chair of the Department of Medicine at the UMass Chan Medical School, Dr. Finberg skillfully directed the educational, clinical, and research activities in the largest academic department while continuing to care compassionately for some of the sickest patients in the hospital. He dramatically expanded the faculty ranks over the next 2 decades as chair and created new divisions. He was known for mentoring his chiefs and being a generous collaborator with other chairs and system leaders across the UMass Medical School and the UMass Memorial Health Systems. He established close ties with other academic institutions and clinical affiliates, and he was a strong advocate for faculty and staff development, overseeing 3 residency programs and fellowship training programs in more than 16 specialty and subspecialty areas. Dr. Finberg's impact on his colleagues and mentees, and I can attest to this as well, was profound and cannot be understated. He met with every internal medicine residency applicant for 20 years, and he deeply cared about each of his over 400 faculty and staff. He was invested in mentorship and was proud of his contributions to the career development of his many students. His residents and faculty were also part of his support system, many of whom went on to illustrious careers and whose achievements have brought international recognition to our medical school and health system. Dr. Finberg was known for his infectious laugh, his dry wit, and his great sense of humor, and of course, his iconic 10-gallon hat. He will be greatly missed by his colleagues, peers, and family. And I will say personally, when I needed to start a think tank about how to respond to the pandemic to help the city, he was the first person I went to, and he was the go-to person right until the end. And for that, I think the entire city is grateful, and the city manager made a point of telling me to thank him. He appeared at several of our press conferences to calm the waters, and that wasn't easy sometimes. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Joyce Fingeroth, who will be accepting the award in his name. And Dr. Fingeroth, if you're here, please stand up. This is the commemorative tray we have for Dr. Finberg. Thank you for sharing him with us for all these years. Please come.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hirsch, and members of the Worcester District Medical Society for this honor. Bob was indeed a COVID hero, and every phase of his greater than 40-plus year career contributed to his ability to mitigate the many complications of the COVID pandemic. Since you so beautifully talked about about his contributions to medicine, UMass Medical Center, to Worcester, and to the greater, really the greater country and globe, I thought I would like to defer. I received so many wonderful letters and notes after Bob died, and I thought I would selectively just read just a couple of those. Oops. To let you know what people were thinking at the medical center, in the greater community, his previous fellows, and I'm going to start. So this was from Dr. Well, first of all, following, though not quite over, the COVID pandemic, his colleagues at UMass, including Dave McManus, Kate Fitzgerald, Doug Gollenbach, Celia Schiffer, Evelyn Kirk-Jones, and many others paid, multiple tributes to Bob, which I believe, Dr. Hirsch, you voiced some of those. They revolved around his clinical, scientific, administrative, and public health contributions. Of course, not to mention his personal generosity, kindness, integrity, courage, and of course, laughter. And so I'm going to read some of the comments our family received. First from Dr. Jennifer Wang, who says it all. Bob's leadership and contributions from the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic were seminal, extending well beyond our institutional and local community. His work impacted how SARS infection is treated and prevented at the global scale. At UMass, we collectively look to Bob for guidance for numerous aspects of COVID-19 diagnostic testing, therapeutic agents, including antivirals, anti-inflammatory agents, and monoclonal antibodies, the development of research models in vitro and in vivo for understanding viral pathogenesis, infection control, drug and vaccine development, and means to prevent future pandemics. He led the UMass COVID-19 clinical research study team tirelessly, and as one nurse aptly noted, we couldn't say no to whatever Bob asked of us, no matter how tired we were, because we knew that he was out there at all hours doing it himself. He took only one day off during the first pandemic, and we came to expect to find him plugging away in his office, in the lab, on the hospital floor, and directly enrolling clinical research subjects in his trials. He sounds like a superhero, but for those of us who work with him closely, we knew that this is simply how Bob operated, evenly, determinedly, and tirelessly, with razor-sharp acumen and making sure to address all issues, large or small. I really appreciated that from Jennifer. Dick Ellison also commented. He said, "What I was particularly struck about Bob was that after all this time serving as chair of medicine at UMass Med School for 20 years, and at a point in life when many of his contemporaries retired, as the COVID pandemic began, he didn't sit back. Instead, he intensified both his basic and clinical research activities and may have had his most productive time as a scientist. He became the principal investigator on more than a half dozen clinical trials for the treatment of COVID-19, and was the leading figure at UMass Memorial Medical Center in offering patients in Central Mass access to cutting-edge therapy for COVID." But I wanted to elaborate on Dick's comments. Bob had no intention of retiring. He was avidly looking for his next adventure in medicine, science, and public health as the pandemic slowed down, and I assure you, he was. Many of Bob's former trainees wrote to me. Jeff Cohn said, "I remembered Bob as a terrific mentor during my ID fellowship and rotation through the Farber. Bob was a brilliant, talented researcher and truly cared about training the next generation, as evidenced by the legacy of the very large number of trainees he leaves behind. I never got to see him in the hat that he apparently adopted after moving to UMass. I will really miss his wit and wisdom." Jeff is now head of the virology section at NIH. What he did not mention, yet observed in several of the letters that we received, was that Bob had the most amazing and eclectic collection of ties, and that was a very frequent source of comments. Ken Kay also commented, summed up his training with Bob. "Most importantly, Bob was a wonderful, warm human being who was always full of life." And perhaps what was most surprising and heartwarming to our family was the letters we received from patients and even community members that Bob did not know personally. And I'll just read you a few of these and then end. So Sharman Sacchetti from the WCBV TV wrote, "Bob was a simple joy to have interviewed throughout this pandemic. He was clear, so well informed and thoughtful. Plus, you could always count on him to have a sense of humor when it was needed." And a local family wrote to me, "You do not know us, and we do not know the doctor. We have though seen him on Channel 5 giving COVID updates. The first time we saw and heard him, both my wife and I said, 'Isn't he a nice man?'" Another segment he spoke about winning the $1 million vaccine drawing. He was pretty certain he would win. "We wanted to let you know how sad we were. He gave confidence in what he said about the virus and what we should be doing. He must have been a fine husband, father, grandfather, and friend to you all." That was really nice. And then a patient wrote to us, and many patients and many families wrote to us too, but I selected this patient. This is sent to you to tell you of the admiration and appreciation of Dr. Finberg. When I was in the UMass ICU for COVID, Dr. Finberg appeared and through glass asked permission before my intubation to add me to the study involving remdesivir. That was during 3/20, and it was a new approach. Seeing his calm and reassuring face, I agreed. During my recovery, he and his assistant Karen followed my recovery, and what a difference their presence made to my recovery. Dr. Finberg's availability, willingness to answer questions was impressive, knowing how very busy he must have been. His approach made one feel as though you were his only patient. What a gift. I remain and will always be grateful that I met and was part of the care given by this warm and kind gentleman. What a loss to the medical community. So, and then I wanted to talk a little bit more personally. So during the first year of the pandemic, our oldest daughter, a human rights attorney who had a cardiac arrest complicated by a severe brain injury, was sheltering in place at a local rehab nursing home, which, as all such facilities, had severe staffing shortages. Bob and I decided I should shelter in place with our daughter, which meant I could not return if I left, and subsequently neither of us could leave her room. Bob was home alone during all of this for more than a year, working his heart out every day. Still, every morning before 6 a.m., he would arrive at the rehab with the clean clothes that I had thrown down from the balcony the day before and washed, and with a cup of freshly brewed coffee, variously delivered to our daughter's room. He was just, the bottom line was, Bob was a Massachusetts COVID hero, a U.S. and global COVID hero, and at home, a COVID and everything hero. Thank you.
Congratulations to our award recipients, and thank you to the Finberg and Fingeroth family for joining us this evening and remembering Dr. Finberg. At this He's a surgical oncologist at UMass, and he performs some of the longest and most complex abdominal surgeries that we do at UMass. I remember when we all would receive our assignments for the following day, everyone was always happy when they were working with Dr. Whalen. He's a great surgeon to work with, and whether it was residents or attendings in my department of anesthesiology, we were always happy to work with Dr. Whalen, and it was usually an all-day affair, as the types of surgeries that he did are, but we never minded how long they were. So he's been a great person to work with during my time as president of the district, and at this time it's my pleasure to present to him the pin.
Well, thank you.
And you'll notice the presidents in the room, including myself, wearing the WDMS pin. It's given, we decided to give it at the beginning of the term. It used to be given at the end of the term, but Martha had the great idea that we should do it at the time of transfer of power. So at this time I want to invite Dr. Whalen to the podium.
Here I am.
Here you are.
Thank you. I feel relieved that we're not necessarily doing the pinning, because I was wondering how that would go and whether it would hurt. Thank you, Spiro. So Spiro has done so much for us as president of the society over these difficult past 2 years of the pandemic. Is now going to have the opportunity to concentrate more on his other day job, which is the chief medical officer of UMass, in addition to being a practicing pediatric anesthesiologist. So a busy stretch, and the quality officer for anesthesia, and also he's going to continue to serve the society as one of the delegates to the AMA at a national level from the Massachusetts Medical Society. So. Thank you, Spiro. Thanks very much. Fellow members, colleagues, and guests, I have to tell you, it is good to be together again. I'm both honored to become the standard bearer for this society, and humbled by the many accomplishments of my predecessors in this position before me have done so much for the society and for the Worcester community. So I want to thank you all. Not only Spiro for his leadership over these past 2 years, but also my partners in crime, my fellow officers over the last 2 years. Marianne Felice for her great good sense and energy, and dare I say sparkle, as well as her complete devotion to the Worcester District Medical Society. She's done so much for us. It's really been wonderful to work with.
with her, as well as Spiro. And then our treasurer, who's not here tonight, our historian, our everything man, the multi-talented and prodigiously productive, indefatigable Dale McGee, who's really been wonderful throughout this whole thing. So I also want to thank Martha Wright and Melissa, who I saw a moment ago here off to my left, for everything that they do. They're the group that makes Worcester Medical Society, District Medical Society, go and run, frankly. So thank you so much. And there are so many of you in the room here to thank for all of your help and contributions over the years. And I'm afraid that, if I try to name everybody, I'm sure to miss somebody. But I did want to make special mention of one person particularly, and that is Mike Hirsch, who has really been the public health service, the public health officer for us over the last couple of years in really sort of difficult times. And I just want to say, Michael, you've been inspiring, an example for all of us of both honesty and steadfast decency and just hanging in there. So we really thank you for going above and beyond. You really have been something. I am nevertheless encouraged to believe that the scourge of COVID may be moving behind us, if not at least the scourge part, if not the virus itself. And I am determined to honor the values and traditions of this medical society, which started out as a gathering of physicians in the local tavern of a local hospital, a local hotel, 228 years ago. And so here we begin another year of the Worcester District Medical Society. There are more of us now than there were then, but here we are. We're in a tavern, so there's a bar at the end, so it sort of counts. And we're in a local hotel, and I think that we can all agree that this is a worthy tradition, worth celebrating and worth upholding. So I'm hoping after 2 years of Zoom meetings, we can do a lot more of this sort of thing. One of the most obvious differences, though, between then and now is the explosion of scientific medical expertise in the meantime. And this has led to progressive specialization of physicians, of their practices, and even of their medical societies. Tremendous good is accrued to Worcester and to everywhere else because of that array of expertise. But there's an old saying about expertise and experts, right? The definition of an expert is someone who is away from home a lot, because there is nothing like being at home to help plant an expert's feet into the ground. And so it's very important that we have here in Worcester a home society for physicians, to remind each other that though our array of expertise here in Worcester is broad and deep, and far different than how we began with this society, that the values and the needs of physicians and practicing doctors and their duties to their communities has not changed all that much in the meantime. We want to be able to heal the afflicted whenever we can. We want to learn what we need to do that job as well as we can. We want to promote the health and well-being of the folks who don't think they need us just yet. And we want to lean on each other for succor and support for our rewarding and yet demanding profession. So we are fortunate to have a society of practicing doctors here in Worcester that has been doing just that for 228 years. So go tell your friends, tell your colleagues, have them join us, make sure that they come and join us. I know that there are going to be many challenges going forward in this next year or two, and I'm going to need your help and support. And if the past few years have taught us anything, they may be challenges that we haven't even appreciated or there yet. But I am sure there's little that we cannot make better if we are together, true to our purpose, and generous with each other. And so again, I want to ask for your support and thank you again for the honor and privilege of being elected president of your society today. Thank you. And now I think I get to hand this back to you, do I not? And I have to present you with a chair, which is going to your home. you know. So you'll get to sit in it and think of us, and you know, I don't know what else you'll do, but it'll be comfortable, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations to Dr. Whalen. So as I complete my term as president of the society, I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve you all in this role. Over the past 2 years, I've witnessed the laudable dedication of our officers, committee chairs, and committee members, and staff, of course, to promote all the initiatives that make our district one of the most active and accomplished of all other districts. We should all be proud. Before I finish, I'd like to express my thanks to my fellow officers, who all actually served as mentors to me prior to me being elected president of the society. Dr. Whalen, our incoming president, has led our legislative committee successfully over the years. Dr. McGee spent countless hours streamlining the finances of our society and positioning us on a path that will protect our considerable assets as we move into the future. Dr. Felice's relationships to the community were valuable as she served as our secretary, and her boundless energy always brought a fresh perspective to our discussions. The district serves our community in many ways, and there is no better example of these efforts than our scholarship committee, chaired by Dr. Michelle Pugnier. I want to make you all aware of a very generous donation of $35,000 from our immediate past president, Dr. Sadeb Passy, and his wife, Carolyn, towards our scholarship fund. We appreciate all of your contributions to the scholarship fund, and on your tables you'll see tents that allow you to scan a QR code and contribute tonight if you so wish. Our district's publication, Worcester Medicine, continues to create timely local content on topics of interest to our Worcester community. I want to thank Dr. Robert Sorrenti and Dr. Jane Lockery for their leadership and dedication to the continued success of this publication, especially as we transition to a completely online platform. Recently, as you heard, we adopted a guest editor model, and this has worked really quite well. So if any of you are interested, please contact the office and we'd be happy to have you serve in that role. We also encourage you to view online our video publication, Health Matters, and I want to thank Melissa for producing that and keeping that program going over the years. Our newest committee, the Student Committee, has made valuable contributions to our programming and involving the next generation of leaders in our organization. Student Dr. Bennett Voigt at UMass and Dr. Ann Larkin's efforts have contributed to the success, and we appreciate all their efforts. Dr. Larkin's in the corner over there. On the public health front, we are fortunate to have Dr. Michael Hirsch serve as chair of our Public Health Committee, especially as COVID-19 affected our communities and patients. Dr. Hirsch's evidence-based recommendations provided comfort and guidance to all our members as we navigated the changing landscape as we managed the virus. The Medical Education Committee, chaired by Dr. Mary O'Brien, continued to plan informative, timely, and valuable programs for our members. The Women's Caucus, chaired by Dr. Linda Young, continues to provide a forum for women members to exchange ideas and network. And finally, I'd like to thank Dr. Fred Baker for his efforts as chairman of our Personnel Committee. So, before I leave the podium, I want to thank the leadership of UMass Memorial for always supporting my involvement in organized medicine since my days as a resident. I'd especially like to thank Dr. Stephen Hurd, the late Dr. Shubi Kaur, Dr. Matthias Waltz, Dr. Alice Kozar, and Dr. Eleanor Dudick for their support in all of my professional efforts. And special kudos to Martha Wright, our executive director, who has worked diligently to maintain momentum for all of our society's work during the pandemic, even with a fractured lower extremity. So at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker. Senator Harriette Chandler represents the 1st Worcester District and currently serves as the Massachusetts Senate President Emerita. She previously served as a Senate President from 2017 to 2018. She began her political career in 1991, serving on the Worcester School Committee. In 2000, she was the first woman elected to the Massachusetts State Senate. On Beacon Hill, Senator Chandler has fought to expand access to healthcare services and for the rights of those experiencing homelessness. She has worked to pass policies that support children and families across the Commonwealth, and is a passionate advocate for women's rights and reproductive justice. She holds degrees from Wellesley College, Simmons College of Graduate Management, and Clark University. She also holds honorary degrees from Worcester State College and Clark University, as I mentioned. She is married to her husband, attorney Burton Chandler, and has 3 adult children and 4 beloved grandchildren. We appreciate her joining us this evening, and we invite her to the podium for her remarks.
I have had trouble hearing all evening, so can you hear me? Yes. I'm going to speak as loudly as I possibly can without straining my voice any further than it is already strained. First of all, good evening. And I am not the first woman to be elected to the Senate. I'm the first Worcester woman to be elected. So that's a difference. I really have to explain that to you. And I certainly want to thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. My work in the Massachusetts legislature and in public service has spanned nearly 3 decades. It sort of shocks me when I think about it. Lawmaking is not easy. It's convoluted, it's slow, it's frustrating, and sometimes years of work results in nothing. I've had that experience. It's a horrible experience. I'm going through it right now, in fact. Over the years, I had much to learn. Healthcare isn't easy either. It also takes years of education and decades of experience to deliver the best quality care to your patients. And then there's healthcare policy. It also takes, it's an ambitious blend of two fields that takes nothing short of a persistent woman or a persistent man to master. Lucky for me, for all my years that I have spent in public service, I have had the Worcester District Medical Society by my side and frankly at my back. Together we've shared information, we've shared experience and expertise. We've criticized, we've complimented, and together we have made good healthcare policy great healthcare policy. For that I thank you all. Your collaboration has been important and invaluable. I ran for and was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives because I wanted to improve schools. I wanted to improve education. I felt that with my background and my scholastic background, that's where I could do the most good. It was much to my surprise when 2 years later I found myself sitting atop the Healthcare Committee as chairwoman. What did I know about healthcare? Turns out I didn't need to know much. The only credential that really was necessary for me to assume the chairmanship was to have University Hospital. How many of you remember the name University Hospital? Nobody here? I bet somebody has to remember it. That was the former name of the hospital that sits on top of the lake. And the medical school, both the University Hospital, which was the state's hospital, and medical school were in my district. My community was, and still is, a healthcare community. And thus I had to become knowledgeable. My path was set, and healthcare policy would be my challenge. But how was I to do it? I needed help, I needed advice. Who could I turn to if not my own community? At one time or another, many of you in this room have been my teachers and my allies. And at the same time, you've called me for my help and advice with public policy issues. Sometimes we've agreed, and sometimes we haven't agreed. But it is a two-way street, and a relationship which starts to form becomes that two-way street. One of my biggest allies was someone you all are probably familiar with, if only by name, and that was Dr. Leonard Morse. Do you remember, or are we talking ancient history here? Probably ancient history. Ultimately, his only daughter, Elizabeth, worked for me when I chaired the healthcare committee in the House. She's now the chief of staff for the chair of the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Committee in the Senate, and recently wrote a good part of our substance abuse legislation. Usually I get to know physicians because of legislation I am working on. Among others I have worked closely with are Dr. Lou Ireland through the Road Act, Dr. Linda Young, who's here tonight, with her husband, Dr. Sorrenti. Dr. Young went on to become the first woman president of the Massachusetts Medical Society, and she helped for me to understand the different perspective, the death with dignity issue. And I thank you for that very much. I also got to know Dr. Matilda Castile, whom I met originally when she got me involved in the Hector Reyes House, the first Worcester residence for Latino men with substance abuse issues. Got to know Dr. Eric Garcia, who taught me so much about health for the homeless. And I could go on and on talking about the many doctors who lead clerkships and want their nursing and medical students to understand the public policy perspective. I should also say that Bob Sorrenti and Linda Young's son also worked for me one summer, so there are all kinds of connections here. I have worked with some of you on issues that are both complex and controversial. There was the dermatologist that all of you knew, who was gravely concerned about the use of laser technology by people who had little or no training. Of course, beauty salons don't care about that sort of thing. It's just another opportunity to sell something. There was the cord blood donation issue. It was highly technical and deeply divisive in the Senate. There was the determination of need issues from time to time that I turned to you for help. And how can I not reference my very first bill, the drive-through delivery bill, which clearly stated that women could stay in the hospital for 48 hours after normal delivery and 96 hours after a cesarean, rather than the 1 midnight that had previously been the rule. It seems like it's so long ago. It was ancient history, but it was the way it was. I could go on and on about the issues that you were knowledgeable about and how I sought your help. We maintained an open line of communication. I've called on you, and you've called on me. Our work together was in pursuit of better health outcomes for all people, and I believe we succeeded on multiple fronts. One of my proudest achievements was overseeing the merger of University, that hospital on the hill, most of you don't even remember that it was called that, and Memorial Hospital. This was a feat I would never have imagined undertaking. But listening to the medical community, the patient community, and to the needs of Central Massachusetts residents made the entire effort possible. The issue was really a very simple one. It was a time when Worcester had multiple hospitals. Probably most of you don't remember, but we had 7 or 8 hospitals at one point in Worcester, none of which happened to be doing too well. In fact, many were closing, and there remained the State's Hospital, University Hospital, and Memorial Hospital, which was a private hospital, a very Brahmin hospital, and both had financial concerns, and both were exploring mergers with Boston-based hospitals, and yet the simple truth was that if they had that merger, their tertiary care, our tertiary care in Massachusetts, in Worcester, would have been handled by a Boston partner. And that was something that people had to consider, had to do something about. My goal was to ensure that health care could be delivered at the community level. And UMass Memorial Hospital is today one of the leading medical institutions in the state and the largest employer in Central Massachusetts. The merger was not without its difficulties and problems to be worked out. How do you merge one hospital that has a union and another one that doesn't? How do you merge all these different issues, different cultures? How do you do it? But we worked together and side by side and found solutions that we can look back on now with great pride. Even today, when hospital megacorporations like Mass General Brigham look to expand in central Massachusetts, I make sure to listen to my community and their needs, and to listen to the medical community and what they need to best deliver quality care to their patients. Together, we fought to keep MGB out of central Massachusetts, and our fight was ultimately successful. But in addition to delivering quality, community-based care, women's health care has been one of my strongest passions. Over the past few years, the legislature has enacted pro-women health care policies that I believe should have been passed decades ago. We started body part by body part, but now we are holistic in our approach and talk in terms of health equity and social justice. 3 of my own bills, and you've probably heard about them, the Nasty Women Act, the Access Bill, and the Roe Act, were passed into law to protect women's access to co-pay-free contraceptives, to repeal draconian statutes that restricted women's access to health services, and to expand access and codify the right to abortion in state law. These are all very important. And as we look at what, thank you. I just must tell you that Joy, before she left, said, "You please tell them that Joanne was so concerned about abortions and abortion rights, and she would have been so proud of what you've done here." But the right to abortion and codifying into law means that Massachusetts will continue to be able to have abortions in Massachusetts. We probably will become a center for abortions. I mean, I don't like to think of it that way, but that's probably what's going to happen. These bills were legislated because women in power understood their own health care needs. Linda Young kind of talked to me about this, and this is the sort of thing she talks about with her women doctors, so that they understand exactly what is happening. Female legislators and advocates, working with their male counterparts, identified the shortcomings and the risks that existed within the legal and healthcare system, and we were able to tailor legislation to specifically help women whose healthcare services were in jeopardy. This is what it means to break down systemic biases. I was motivated to pass these contraceptive access bills because I'm old enough to remember the time when women did not have access to any contraception. I remember when abortions happened in back alleys. I remember the fear I felt in those days, and how our daughters and granddaughters should never be forced to feel that fear today or any time in the future. I remember the Worcester Foundation for Biological Research. Does that ring any bell to anybody here? I see some heads nodding, so I guess it does. But I remember the Worcester Foundation for Biological Research and Doctors Hoagland. Familiar? Dr. Pincus? Familiar? Dr. Chang? Familiar? And the discovery of the pill in neighboring Shrewsbury. It changed the lives and the expectations of women across the world. We build on that now. That is my lived experience, and that becomes good public policy. Under female leadership, and I'm going to brag a little bit here, the legislature also passed universal paid family medical leave and the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. The scope of these laws touches upon women's health. They identify medical burdens specific to women that have hindered women's ability to succeed in the workforce. And while they are not explicitly pieces of healthcare policy, the laws identify the intersection of women's health and the overall well-being of women as members of society. We need women's voices, and we need them in positions of leadership, whether that is in the State House or the ICU. Diverse voices bring diverse perspectives that lead to better and healthier lives. We cannot take that for granted, and we cannot lose sight of how far we still have to go. As a society, while we must continue to fight for women's rights and women's health care on Beacon Hill, even after I retire, which is the end of this year, we must continue to fight for representation and parity within the healthcare community. But now, it is certainly not just women who have been overlooked for so long, and I must stress this. It is not just women who have been overlooked for so long. Now we understand the damage that has been done to people of color and people who are poor. The inequities that have grown out of the social determinants of healthcare, as we call it, the so-called hotspots that data has brought to our attention. We need you to ensure that clinical trials include women and people of color, that all medical students have mentors, and that all patients' symptoms, complaints, and concerns are taken seriously, regardless of the color of their skin or their ability to pay. We need your skills in analyzing new technologies that are being developed every day. We look to you for assistance in dealing with the high cost of pharmaceuticals, outrageous hospital prices, and insurance costs, the threat of new pandemics, rural health needs, and so many other concerns that confront us almost on a daily basis and cause us to deplore a broken American healthcare system. I could not have accomplished any of my healthcare policy goals without the support and collaboration with this medical community that are here tonight. I am eternally grateful to the Worcester District Medical Society and the doctors and the nurses who have offered me their time, their knowledge, and their expertise as I have navigated the complex world of healthcare policy. I am also, of course, grateful for the expert medical care my husband and I have received from your hands over the years. From Beacon Hill to when we have needed you most, you have shown up to help. I cannot express my gratitude enough, and I encourage everyone here to forge the same relationships I have had with you, with whomever is elected to serve the first Worcester District in November. Thank you again, my friends. It's been a pleasure.
Would anybody like to ask questions of Senator Chandler? We'll pass the microphone around.
Any questions from the audience? We have a microphone.
Bob?
Oh,
So he's doing
he's
the
coming up
video.
to do the video.
Yes.
I just get the microphone.
You mentioned your interest in death with dignity.
Yes.
Is this the same as the medical aid in dying?
Yes.
Could you expand on that, on your feelings a little bit, please?
My stand, and that is that I support it.
Thank you.
I'm very honest about what I support and what I don't support. And you've been very honest in where you stand on these issues. And that helps a great deal. If we each fudge a little, then we're getting nowhere. But when you tell me the truth, where you stand, and I tell you the truth, then we can move forward.
Another question here in the back.
Matt.
Not quite a question, but I want to thank you, Senator Chandler, for all that you have done. You mentioned the Hector Reyes House, but you've also been a champion in every other issue that we talk about, whether it's addiction, whether it's women's health, most recently helping to put up LIFT and Harbor programs that help with prostituted women, and you're helping us with housing in our community. So I'm extremely grateful for all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So,
question?
No,
No.
no. We have, so I can attest, as the chair of the legislative committee over the
Right.
last few years, that one of the great things about Senator Chandler is when she turned up, it was always very straightforward, never afraid to tell it like she saw it to us, which was, as you said, very productive. Always a good way to go.
Thank you.
So we really appreciate everything we've done. We're glad you're not done yet. So we have here a scrapbook.
Oh my God. My husband has scrapbooked our whole lives. That is incredible.
Well, so this is from all your interactions, or many of your
Oh my
interactions.
God, you'll
from
love it,
Worcester,
buddy.
with the Worcester District Medical Society. We even got a few menus from the legislative breakfast there,
Oh my goodness.
which we hope were, that the sentiments are as good as the breakfasts were.
We have 37 scrapbooks. 37. He has done every single one of them himself, and this is right up your alley. You'll love it.
It's already done, so you
So
can
it's all
just
right.
admire it.
I'm not done with it
Oh
yet.
my goodness, you're gonna have to carry that for me, 'cause it's beautiful.
So we're so grateful to you. You've been a champion, you've been a role model for women, you've listened, you've acted. You're a true advocate for this community, and we know that. So we also found out we're not allowed to give you gifts.
That's right. Not big gifts.
Right, so we had to figure out how much could we give you.
$50 or under.
I know, so we're not telling you about $49 a month. And so this, for these beautiful
They're
flowers
beautiful.
that we thought were right for spring, and we hope you'll be able to plant them in your garden
I will.
or do something with them.
I will enjoy them. That I can
But
promise
we
you.
think we're allowed to give you this.
Yes, you are. If it's under
I
$50.
mean,
But you have to carry it.
Okay, so some of you know that I sometimes break laws or rules. Rules, not
Rules.
laws, rules. So I thought this is all I need. Now,
This is
to break a
beautiful.
rule that I'm giving to Harriette Chandler, whom I admire immensely. But we want to give you this from all of us, Mary, and thank you again. It'll be easier for you to
I think
carry.
that we hope you
We also have two history books from the Medical Society. Our
To
history
the
books.
history book.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Thank you so much.
Is that for me?
It goes with the
I
bottom.
don't need this because I'm going to write you this.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you so
Almost
much.
looks like pizza.
That was that pizza. Thank you
Senator
all.
Chandler, thank you very much for all your work. So I believe I have the gavel to both make the announcements and close the meeting. So I want to remind everybody that we have the Women in Medicine Leadership Forum on May 25th. It's a Zoom meeting. We also have the Mass Medical Society annual business meeting coming up with the House of Delegates Session 1 on 4/28. That's where we're going to be voting, I think, on governance issues. House of Delegates Session 2, which is where we will talk about resolutions. And in between, for those of us who are delegates, we'll have the caucuses beforehand, and I'm sure I'll be recruiting you into it. The Worcester Tercentennial Celebration, 300th birthday, so older even than the Worcester District Medical Society by a couple of years, is on the 10th to the 12th of June, and Dale McGee is organizing a bus tour that will tour around, and we'll have lectures, and somebody's going to, Lee is, I think, going to be playing a historical figure on the bus as we have slideshows and everything. So it should be fun. But I'm sure we'll be putting out the words to what that is. And that's, and then the Worcester District Medical Society Historical Bus Tour is on the 26th of June. So things to look forward to. So with that, unless there's an objection, I am going to close this annual business meeting until next year. All in favor? All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.